I have to talk about the sexy class. The sexy class was like the best class. Hi, I'm Stephanie Libs. I am a local chiropractor here in Pacific Beach, and I specialize in pediatrics and pregnancy. I just had my second baby 4 months ago, and I took CARE's class, the hypnobirthing class at the Birth Education Center. I absolutely loved it, and it helped me have 2 vaginal births. My first, Aubrey, she's a bit over 2 years old now. When I got pregnant with her, I knew immediately I wanted to take the class at the Birth Education Center because I had heard so many great things through the birthing community about the class. And it really gave me tools to get through my pregnancy and labor. With her, I had a really long labor. Without the tools from the class, I think I would have had a very different outcome with that birth. And then fast forward to the birth of my 4-month-old. We had a beautiful home birth with him, and again, it was all the tools that I learned from the class that really helped me get through it and helped us have the home birth that I really wanted. So to prepare for the birth of my first, I obviously did the class at the BEC. I read the hypnobirthing book. I also read Birthing from Within. I read just about anything I get my hands on, actually. I read The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding, which actually talks a lot about birth as well. I read Well-Adjusted Babies, which is written by a chiropractor in Australia. I read Anna Mae Gaskin, especially Spiritual Midwifery. I loved that one. As a prenatal chiropractor, I would see women and would hear both positive and negative birth stories just because of the work that I did, and would have to ask women in consult what their birth experience was. So I would say when I was pregnant, I was exposed to a lot of birth stories, but I had to just make sure I kind of overcame all of that with reading positive birth stories. And then for the second, I would watch a lot of birth stories on YouTube at home, especially with my daughter, because I wasn't sure if I was going to have her at the birth or not, so I wanted her to be a little more familiar with birth, and just watching some videos of what it might sound like or what it might look like. She was with me for about half of the labor, mimicking all the poses that I was doing, which was really funny. What I also did with both pregnancies is I listened to the audio that came with the hypnobirthing book. So I would go in for my acupuncture appointment and put in my earbuds and listen to the meditations there. I have to talk about the sexy class. The sexy class was like the best class. That class really bonded my husband and I together a lot, and it was just learning the way to touch each other and comfort each other. It's something that nobody's ever taught that before, and it was such a wonderful class to get connected, especially through the pregnancy, and I can't even describe it in words because it was like we left that class feeling so much more connected and ready for the birth, and felt like we were there to support each other. It was priceless. It was so fun. My first daughter, Aubrey, as a chiropractor, I think most chiropractors probably intend to have home births, and we tend to look at things on the natural side and try and have as natural an experience as possible with most things. And so I knew I wanted a home birth. I hired a midwife and had excellent midwifery care with Nicole Morales here in San Diego. I just felt so passionate about having a home birth, and it's really what we wanted to do. And so I didn't do any co-care. I hadn't been to an OB. I just did everything with midwife. When it came time to labor, I was in labor a really long time. So I was in labor for 3 days at home, pretty consistent labor, contractions every 5 minutes, lasting for a minute, the whole kit and caboodle. It just went on and on, and I didn't really progress past about a 7. My water didn't break. After 3 days of just consistent contractions, I was exhausted. We were all exhausted, but it was the tools from hypnobirthing that helped me get through those 3 days, because I kept thinking in my mind what CARE said to me, which was, you can do anything for a minute and just get through this one contraction. So every contraction I had, it was like, just focus on this one. Doesn't matter how many came before or how many are coming later, just get through this one. I think that's what really made me survive for 3 days in labor. But after the 3 days, I called it and I said, I'd like an epidural. I need to just get some sleep and try again. So we packed everything up. We made our way to the hospital, and we were totally that couple that in the class, I remember Kara saying, make sure you have gas in your car. As someone who was having a home birth, we weren't going to go to the hospital, so we did not fill our car with gas. And guess what? Our gas light was on the way. So we stop at the gas station. I'm in the back like a wild animal in the full throes of labor, having contractions. We stop and I yell at my husband, you're only putting in $5 and we're going. Hurry up. $5 of gas and we're on our way. We get to the hospital. Of course, they have no idea who we are, but our midwife came with us. She brought all of the records. She was so organized. They got us admitted, and the first doctor that we had, she swore that I had gestational diabetes and that I had a huge baby, which all of my records from our midwife said that we did not. So she was definitely pushing us for a C-section. She said that she would not help me with a vacuum or forceps because my baby was probably too big and I would have shoulder dystocia. Kind of off-putting when the doctor who's going to deliver your baby says she won't help you. And she swore my baby was at least 10 pounds, and she said, I'll give you 2 hours, then we're going to come back and do C-section. I knew in my heart that I just needed to sleep, I needed to rest, and I wanted to try again for vaginal birth. So luckily she went away, she got busy, and we got a whole shift change. A new nurse came in who was amazing. She was a former doula. She was familiar with hypnobirthing. She was so supportive, and I was a little bit worried. The next doctor came in, was a perinatologist, and I was like, oh great, this guy is totally gonna push a C-section. Well, he came in, palpated my belly and said, oh, you don't have a big baby. I'll just see you when you're ready to push. So luckily my midwife and husband were there the whole time, and with the tools from hypnobirthing and just everything we had gone through with the support, they were so supportive there. And eventually I got some rest with the epidural. They did break my water, but a couple hours later I was ready to push, and I was at Mary Birch, which is the higher risk hospital, so I was certain I was going to end up with a C-section, but luckily we were able to persevere, and even with an epidural, I delivered on my hands and knees, which kind of a funny story there. I'm literally fully naked on my hands and knees pushing, and the nurse says, I'm so sorry, I have to go take my break. A new nurse comes in, and it's a girl I went to high school with. So talk about embarrassing there. But it ended up to be, we had a vaginal birth that we wanted. We weren't at home, but I was able to push through 3.5 days of labor and do it vaginally, which was really what we wanted. When my daughter was born, she wasn't passing the hearing test right away because they did all the screening tests in the hospital. The audio tech was checking her and trying to redo the test and said, I'm going to check one more time. If she doesn't pass, we're going to have to do more tests. And so we said, well, can we adjust her? She said, of course, it's your baby, go ahead. So I adjusted her, and she started moving her head around and swallowing, and did some cranial work on her, and then she passed the test right away. I knew we wanted to have more kids, and so we got pregnant not too long after. I think Aubrey was about 14 or 15 months when we got pregnant. I'm still breastfeeding, and I breastfed her through my entire second pregnancy, and I'm still breastfeeding now, tandem nursing. For the birth of my second, I knew we wanted to try for a home birth again. I knew I had the tools to do it. I felt a little bit more prepared because I had been through one birth before, and so I knew what it felt like to feel the surge, to feel the need to push. I felt like just more prepared the second time. Again, I went through and did like a refresher on reading the hypnobirthing book and listening to the meditations and stuff like that. And so when it came time to have him at home, I was in labor, and in the back of my mind, I kind of wanted a free birth. I was like, maybe I won't even need the midwives, and I'll just have this like magical, spontaneous birth, and I'll do it on my own, and it'll be beautiful. And well, that didn't happen. But called the midwife. I was in labor. I got to a point where I knew I needed her to come support. My husband was here. Aubrey was here. My first daughter was here for a little bit of it. And it was so funny because we had watched these videos and practiced. And so I would have a contraction, and I would hold on to something and sway my hips, and then she would watch me, and then she would hold on and sway her hips. And then I would have another one. I would go against the wall and put my head and rock, and then she would look up at me and then she would do it, and it was just the cutest thing. So we had her here for about half the time, and then we eventually had our moms come pick her up. We had a pool set up here at home, and I got in and out of the tub several times, which was so nice. And again, with the second pregnancy, I was like, this is probably gonna be a long labor. I was ready for it. During my entire labor, I just kept saying, get through this one surge and I can do anything for a minute. That just stayed in my mind. The labor with my second ended up being 12 hours. So I got to a point in the labor with my second that I knew I needed the midwives to release my water. I knew I was at that point where as soon as that released, I knew the baby was gonna come out. I asked them if they would do it. They told me, let's try some positional things. Let's try this. So we waited a little bit, threw a few surges to try and get it to go on its own. It didn't, so I knew, and I looked at my midwives and I said, just do it. I know it. I know the baby's gonna come. And so they did. Water burst in the bedroom. As soon as that happened, I felt the head of my pelvis and I knew, okay, this is it. And I said, I wanna go to the bathroom. And so we go to the bathroom and I'm sitting over the toilet. I've got one hand on the sink, one hand on the toilet paper roll holder, and I could see the fear in my husband's eyes just waiting for one of those things to break. Luckily nothing broke, but I was just holding on, and I remember looking at the midwives and I say, what do? I don't want the baby to fall in the toilet. And they just said, just step forward. I was like, oh, right, okay, just step forward and we're fine. I pushed for about 20 minutes and I was in this total time warp again of like, just get through this moment and we'll be fine, and just focus on this moment. Those were things I learned in the class. The baby was coming. I stepped forward. Dean was able to catch, which was so special. And we didn't know the gender. As soon as the baby came out, I looked and I said, are those balls? And they said, yes, they're balls. It's a boy. And he was on my chest in, several seconds, and then we were back in our bed. One thing that was so different from my first to my second is I did have a tear with both, and the first at the hospital, the doctor stitched me up, and it was so painful and so uncomfortable, and I had such a bad scar, and I had to do so much pelvic floor PT after, and it was just so uncomfortable, and I could barely walk for a few days because of the discomfort, and there was tissue that was bulged and just really, really tight and uncomfortable. With my second, again, I tore, and it was a pretty deep tear, but the midwives took such detail stitching me up. It just came together so much more comfortably, and I didn't have as much pain as I did before. It was just such a better experience overall. And I think with my two birth outcomes, with the first being so long and there was so much unknown with it, and I have all these questions of like, well, what if we had released my water at home? Would we have stayed home? With the outcome not being what we wanted it to be, especially someone who works in the birth community, I felt very like ashamed, like I just wasn't good enough. And so I fell into a bit of a postpartum depression after my first and didn't even realize it. And I didn't realize it until months later, until I was out of it and looking back, and I thought, gosh, that was such a dark time in my life. And I just felt so dark and heavy. Even though we had a fairly positive outcome for what it was, it wasn't what I wanted it to be. With my second, I had these feelings of like, I want to redeem myself and have this home birth. And then I had to kind of check myself and be like, look, I'm not doing this home birth because I need to prove myself. I'm doing this home birth because this is where I feel the most comfortable, and this is where I feel like I can step into my power of femininity and as a woman, and this is the experience I want for myself, not to redeem myself from a bad birth. And so having this second birth, it took a lot of like internal work to heal and process from the first one, but this second time around, it's been so beautiful and wonderful and light and fun, and not as dark and heavy as the first time. So good this time. So what I learned from both births, so I've always had this thought of like, one day I'll grow up, like I thought, okay, once I get to chiropractic college, I'm gonna feel like a graduate student. I'm gonna feel very professional. Okay, and then once I graduate, I'm gonna feel very adult-like. Once I get married, then I'll feel like a more legit adult. And then once I get pregnant, I'll feel even more legit. And once I actually have a baby, then I'll really be an adult. But really, I've just always felt the same. And but what I do think about birth is that it's made me feel so much more empowered as a woman, and like stepping into my divine feminine spirit of like, this is the most amazing work you'll ever do in your life. And I feel like at the core I'm still the same person. I still feel like a kid. I still feel like I don't have my shit together, but I feel so like, gosh, I made a human. I made an entire person in my body, and then I can feed that person with my body. It's just such a beautiful thing to think about, this huge transformation, and how in 9 months your body completely changes, and then 9 months after that completely changes again. Yeah, it's just the most amazing feeling, I think. So that's what I've learned, is like how to bring out my more feminine energy and still, and not that that's a bad thing, and feel like I'm a productive member of society, but I can access this like feminine spirit of mine. Okay, I think, I mean, aside from the sexy class, because that was like, I don't think there was anything better than that ever. And learning how to like, just how to touch your partner, I think is so beneficial, especially for after the baby. It's like the gift that keeps on giving is Carrie's class, and it'll help you make more babies. One of the tools that I think is one of the most important things from the class is the change in language. I remember looking in the hypnobirthing book, and I think there's a page with like all the words and the change in terminology to use, which I don't use all of them all the time, and the traditional stuff is so ingrained, but just knowing that you can change the language to something more positive, more gentle, more empowering is so beneficial. I mean, even talking about breaking your water, it's like, we don't need to break anything. Let's release the water, and a surge instead of a contraction. It's such a more gentle and beautiful and honoring to the birth process. My advice for moms is take the class. Duh. Just take it. You won't regret it. I think, no, but seriously, I think it is so, so, so important to take not just any birth class, because it's good to take a birth class and know what you're doing, but really, really much a better idea to take a class at the BEC, because a lot of the hospital classes, I think, teach you how to be a good hospital patient, but having a class that really is about you and your partner and your baby is so beneficial. So that would be my advice, is definitely take a class. Don't be afraid to reach out for help and be vulnerable and share your experience, because going through that postpartum depression, I felt very alone. I felt scared. I felt ashamed. It took a lot to realize that so many other women were going through the same thing, or had gone through the same thing, or are still going through it. Just talking about it can be really beneficial, and realizing that there are people that care and want to help you and support you through the transition of becoming a mom, which can be really, really, really hard. It's beautiful, but it can also be really hard.